to the sound of scratching at my bedroom door. I dismissed it as my cat trying to get in and attempted to go back to sleep. After some time, the scratching hadn't stopped, and I started to hear small groans from behind the door. I got up to open the door because I was worried something had happened to my cat. But that's when I saw it. My cat was sleeping on a chair next to my bed. The next story is called The Dream. In the dream, it wasn't the rats leaping at his face that disturbed him. It wasn't that they scurried over his clenched tight eyes with their tiny claws, desperate to enter his gaping, screaming mouth. It wasn't that, as much as he tried to rip them from his head. One rat would always manage to squeeze its way through the others and into his mouth. What disturbed him most about the dream was the way the rat's whiskers tickled the back of his throat. The next story is called The Kraken. Below the thunders of the upper deep, far, far beneath in the abysmal sea, his ancient, dreamless, uninvaded sleep, the Kraken sleepeth. Faintest sunlights flee about his shadowy sides, above him swell huge sponges of millennial growth and height, and far away into the sickly light, from many a wondrous grot and secret cell, unnumbered and enormous polypi, winnow with giant arms the slumbering green. There hath he lain for ages and will lie, battening upon huge sea worms in his sleep, until the latter fire shall heat the deep. Then once by man and angels to be seen, in roaring he shall rise on the surface die. I honestly don't get what it was about because it has some pretty difficult English words, but maybe you guys can leave in the comments what it meant. The next story is called What the Animals See. I'm really sorry about all the noise outside. Okay, here we go. Ever notice how in scary stories animals can sense spirits that you humans can't? Ever notice how the spirits are supposed to move incredibly fast? Scientists say dogs and some other animals can't watch TV because their eyes are more efficient than ours, and all they see on the TV is one picture or just static. Basically, videos are made of pictures running at a high rate of speed, right? It would be like if I sped a video searched the area and they found the carcass of Marcus Holster, who was found in a similar way as the rabbits. Eventually, they found Griffin, and he had barely escaped due to being hit by an oncoming train. Griffin died exactly where the original transport crashed. Officers later found that Griffin was institutionalized for killing his family and children on Easter Sunday. For years after the death of Douglas J. Griffin, carcasses are found hanging on Halloween, and some people even claim to see the Bunnyman on the bridge. So what do you choose? To believe the story or pass it off as a myth? One thing is for sure, you'll never know if you don't look. I'm starting to be scared right now because the corners of my dorm is actually very dark right now. Next story is called Feading Time. John and his father lived in a normal country life. They lived out on the countryside, away from most civilization. The closest town was about 25 miles away, about a 30-minute drive if you took a dirt road. They raised animals and sold crops on the farm. John would carry out most of the jobs. He wanted to grow more responsible in his time. John, the pig's throat is empty. Why don't you get more food for them? John's dad said to him one morning. John would get food for the pigs. They were all on a special diet, you see. I just fed them 5 hours ago. There's no way, John said in defense, to no avail. Do you want our award-winning pigs to die of starvation? Their special diet is keeping them alive. If they don't get their meal, they won't be plump and ready for eating. You hear? Yes, Dad, John said as he wandered off through the door. Before John went to fetch their afternoon meal, he wanted to see for himself. There was no way they could have finished it in that time. He pushed open the wood doors that led to the pig pen. He looked into the throat, slightly wrinkling his nose at the sight. Inside the throat laid a man, whom the pigs had exist in alternating generations. The first lives in your walls. When you see them, you're witnessing their death thrones. They'll be gone soon. They die after reproducing. And one day you'll wake up and you just won't feel right. Not sick, not exactly. Just off. Nervous and jittery, like there's something crawling around under your skin. A few days later, you'll realize there is something crawling under your skin. The doctors won't believe you though. You'll get used to the word psychosomatic. You'll insist they are wrong, first politely, then urgently, then screaming in their faces as you feel yourself being eaten alive, but they won't listen to you. Maybe at home, maybe at the hospital, you'll start to feel lethargic. When you try to move, you're slow and clumsy. A few hours later, you'll realize you aren't tired. You're paralyzed. You can try to get help, but there's really no point. They all release neurotoxin at once. Even if you make it, whoever you call will never understand you. You should probably close your eyes at that point while you still can, because then they're going to start burrowing out of your skin. That one is pretty good. Next story is called The Black Tappy Cat. Today was the day he was dreading. He knew they were going to be extremely busy, and quite frankly, he wanted to call out. Seeing as he was already late, his thoughts were briefly distracted by his black tabby quietly pawing at his legs, ready for its breakfast. He made sure to fill up its bowl before he dashed out the door, returning twice to grab whatever he forgot the first few times, and he was off. He breathed a sigh of relief as the last customer left. It had been the best sales day of the year, and they were obviously going to celebrate. He had been contemplating going on home, but he needed to unwind too. He had no serious obligations the next day, so he could stay out as late as he wanted. So when they asked, he happily agreed to go with them. He couldn't open his eyes. He was barely conscious as it and soon be as great as your very own mother. She took great pride in what she did. The following morning, my house erupted into chaos as 2 a.m. blared on my alarm clock. My mother and father were already downstairs, ready to go. I quickly got dressed. By 2:30 a.m., we arrived at the market. What kind of supernatural forces drove these people to shop during those early hours of the morning, I will never know. Nevertheless, my mother was one of them, a ferocious monster hidden behind the skin of a human, ready to pounce at the mention of 1% discount. She soon had me by my wrist and was dragging me throughout the plaza, telling me about all of the family-owned tips and tricks in finding the right products to buy. Speaking in breakneck speeds, I hardly digested a word. She was particularly interested in the produce auction, a single unwavering podium held aloft by a team of 4 pillars and a monolithic slab of wood. A plump man in a black suit stood before the podium, taking in offers and buyers from all directions. Slowly letting go of my hand, my mother turned towards me. "Watch and